When growth stalls, most leaders reach for surface fixes like new campaigns, a sharper sales deck, even new hires. But the real issues are often deeper, such as misaligned systems, broken handoffs, or unreliable data. That's why we built the Growth Readiness Score. In just 5 minutes, you'll get a clear score across 4 critical areas of your revenue operations and see how you stack up against your peers with benchmark data. Tap the link in the show notes to get started. It's quick, insightful, and often reveals issues leaders don't expect.
In almost any business, really, it's like delivery cost as low as possible, customer acquisition costs as low as possible. Those are defensible moats, right? Because if I can acquire them at twice as or half the cost you can acquire them for, I'm going to beat you every time. And if I can deliver it at half the cost you can deliver it, I'm going to beat you every time, right? So I have more oxygen in my business to invest in those things, and therefore I can just, try and guerrilla you. But in the age of AI, I think there's another moat, which is trust. And I think that's the thing that gets missed a lot, because you have every opportunity someone interacts with that AI or that thing that you built, the agent, whatever it happens to be, it's only as good as the output, and you're only as good as your last output at some level, Like we might have some tolerance for a few mess ups, but if it starts continually messing up or we don't trust the results, we're just going to just not trust it at all. And that's really hard to win back.
You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. Today, we are joined by Bill Wilson, the founder and CEO of Pace Pricing and a 3-time founder with more than 20 years in software, product strategy, and SaaS. Bill has led companies through successful exits, including guiding SalesRide to an acquisition by FastSpring, and previously built Mindsea in the mobile app space. Through Pace Pricing, he has coached hundreds of SaaS teams on value-based pricing, data-driven decision-making, and the emotional side of pricing. Bill brings a rare combination of deep product thinking, a structured pricing methodology, and practical experience building teams that stay aligned through growth. Bill, welcome to the RevOps Champions podcast.
Thank you so much. That's quite the intro. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully it was all accurate.
Oh yeah, sounds good.
Bill, so you've been a 3-time founder and operator in software and product for more than 20 years. So what led you specifically toward pricing as the focus of your work?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So for me, I'm a software developer is where I come from. So, highly technical, been writing code for a very long time. And when I got tired of the rat race of writing software for enterprise companies and, off-the-shelf software, I decided to build my own company. And I very, very quickly realized that selling by the hour was not great. So that was sort of my first taste of real pricing was, trying to figure out what to charge for our services. And so I quickly decided to productize the service because I was used to working in product. And so we productized our service and started selling it sort of in a flat fee approach. But along the way, we had developed a small software tool, as software developers do, that allowed us to present our pricing to our customers. And it was very, very specific. It was very good, better, best, kind of like the SaaS model with our 3 productized service offerings. I think we had connected it to HubSpot. So I had a HubSpot form. They could fill out some information and it was built just for them. So every time we had a prospect come through, we'd send them a link to this page that had their name on it essentially and options they could choose. And so at the time we were selling to a lot of B2B SaaS companies, helping them build their companion apps and things like this. And many of them would say to us, "This is a really cool tool. Where did you get it?" And I said, "Oh, we just built it internally. It's just something we use." And my head of sales at the time, Taylor Bond, was very adamant that we push this a little further. And so we built a company called SalesRite, and it was based all around that technology about presenting pricing specifically for B2B SaaS companies. So long answer to your question, the way I got into it was being forced into it and having to understand all of the SaaS pricing models that exist. And through that journey of us trying to sell our own software to B2B SaaS companies, realizing how much anxiety and fear and the rest comes with pricing in general. And almost every single one of my prospect calls would end with a question from them saying, "What do you think of our pricing?" And that's sort of what led me into, it's basically end up doing consulting on these calls for a long time. And I remember I ran my very first pricing project while I still had the startup. And it was a company that needed a lot of help. And I did some research, figured out how to do it, or at least what I thought at the time, and ran my first pricing project. And so, so since then, since we got acquired, I've just been 100% focused on helping B2B SaaS founders get unlocked on pricing. Yeah.
It sounds kind of like some of the things that I know you and I have both learned, which is, when you're so good at something, you don't actually realize that not everybody else is as good
Mhm.
at it something as you are. So it's just like you think everybody knows how to do this, and you sort of realize that that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
So that's a really cool story.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, Bill, you often talk about alignment challenges among product, sales, CS, and leadership. What experiences showed you how costly misalignment can be?
Oh dear. Well, it's funny. Misalignment can show up in lots of different ways. And for what I find is missing in a lot of companies I work with is, well, let me back up. There's a couple things. One, the very first time I start working with a company, the first tell is that I get in a room with the executive leadership team, and it's the very first time they've all talked about pricing together. So that's the first tell, for me at least, that there's misalignment, even in just how we deliver value to our customers. Because if we haven't had the conversation about how we price, then we're probably not having full value conversations across the organization. That's one. We often get brought in as argument settlers for this reason. One side of the house will think one way, and another side of the house will think another, and they're like, "Let's let the experts settle this." So that's also, I mean, and misalignment at that level is incredibly costly.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you are not aligned on how your customers get value and how you actually package that and get it out to people, you're probably leaving money on the table. So it's probably untold amounts of money, depending on the size of the company, that are being just dropped for misalignment reasons. And so
Yeah.
that's a big one. I see that a lot. Just people just misaligned on value. And so which is why I like to use various research methods that sort of get us all on the same page, so we can all look at value at the same lens. And then once we get there and we have alignment on that, now we can start to do the hard work of figuring out how we should capture value and package it up.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were talking about that, and as I was sort of thinking back on my experience with this, it's almost like an sort of a pyramid. Whereas if you have misalignment at the leadership level, if it's misaligned there, the further you go down the organization, the bigger the misalignment becomes, right? So I think most leaders are more familiar with talking about misalignment further down the org, whether it's misalignment between sales and marketing, or sales and delivery, or whatever. But if it's misaligned there, then, and I'm sort of asking for a friend and speaking for a friend, I know that that's typically because there's misalignment at the leadership level. So I think that makes total sense.
Almost certainly. And there's classic misalignments that you see all the time, like you mentioned, sales and delivery, product and marketing, or product and sales. Like there's you can almost just draw a line. And there's 6 departments in a SaaS company, right? And it's like product engineering, marketing, sales, CS, ops, and finance together. And so like you can almost draw a line and put CS and product on one side, and sales and operations and finance on the other.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So which is another proof point that the more aligned you are at the leadership level, the easier you're making it for everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Trickles down.
Yeah. So, Bill, you developed a structured pricing system at Pace. What moment or insight pushed you to formalize your approach into a repeatable framework?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think part of it's built into me, in that I like to productize services because I like to think of things in terms of product. But for me, it's about, what drove me to it really was this idea that these projects can go on forever if you let them, right? Like anything to do with research and, trying to, capture lightning, all these types of things, they can just go on and on and on. So sometimes having a real structured approach to how you deliver these things can be really, really helpful in these engagements, which can have a habit of sort of, scope creep and all that kind of stuff. So that was one of the big drivers. But really, honestly, the big driver for me was just the idea that I felt that there was, in my bones, I felt there was like a 3-stage process to doing this, right? That was a natural progression for me. It's like, you got to package it up, you got to figure out what the price point is, and you got to validate it all, right? And so like that seemed normal to me, but there was stuff missing at the beginning. And so originally it was a 3-phase process, and then eventually it turned into a 4-phase process. And that 4-phase process is what I call profile, which is the part where we go extremely deep on everything, including your customer and how they perceive value and how they buy and all that kind of stuff. And that fed the rest of it. So that was an interesting layer for me. But yeah, ultimately what I wanted to do was build something that I could repeat over and over and over again and rely on and refine, so that I had something. Because I had in the past just take bespoke work. And every time you take bespoke work, you're just reinventing the wheel every single time. And so I decided early that I wanted to help B2B SaaS firms of a certain size, and they had similar challenges. So I just optimized for those. So I don't know if that is a long-winded answer to your
No,
question.
that makes total sense. But so what you're saying is, so you essentially you really did it for your own scalability of pace. You
Mhm.
didn't you weren't necessarily doing it because you were doing it necessarily because you thought that that's what your clients would want. But I'm guessing what happened as you started using it, you realized that every client was essentially being satisfied by using a productized model.
Yeah, and I mean, it gave us a baseline to start iterating from. And so,
Mm.
it was definitely bound in their core problem about they want good pricing and packaging, but they don't know, like there's three layers of that they don't know. They don't know how to do. And so I just based everything on those, well, how do I help them understand those three things? And
Mm.
that's how I end up building it out. So it was based on what they needed, but not necessarily. But then, yeah, like you said, it was based on largely on what can I build that I can scale
Mm.
that is repeatable and reusable, but also solves the problem. So I guess that's, yeah, you're right. It was definitely built out of my own desire for scalability,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
one of the other lessons I've learned is never automate something until you've actually done it a few times.
yeah. That's a whole nother conversation. So would you say you still kind of think through it as those three steps, which is like some version of profiling, calibration, and
Mhm.
validation?
Yeah, I would say it's more about, the way I look at it. So the name of the company Pace is actually born out of this thing. So profile, architect, calibrate, and execute. So the
Okay.
idea is that you profile everything and then you architect the design, like architect the packaging
Yeah.
and the pricing and the offers and all that kind of stuff. You
Mhm.
calibrate it against the market and your own, internal impact analysis. So you understand what it's going to do for the business and how it's going to show up in the market. And then
Mhm.
you execute on that, which is basically got to go out and validate it with real customers, your own customers first, and then new customers to make sure it's all going to work. And so I do think about every project that we work on, whether it's the PACE pricing system, the PACE fast track, which is another version of it that's workshop driven, or even my pricing strategy reviews. I think about it in all four categories all the time. And that was the
Mm.
one big takeaway for me because the company used to be called something else. And I changed the name once I sort of locked in on this idea of PACE.
Oh, that's really funny because I was actually that was going to be my next question because I mean, I think that happens quite often where when your framework becomes so powerful that you realize that that's what, that you should actually call your business by that framework. So that's what you did.
That's what I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing was around working with these companies is that there's a lot of mindset changes that have to happen. And I
Mhm.
found that the structured approach, because I always like to build models and ways of thinking through things, and that always sort of helped people
Mhm.
get there. So that just sort of naturally ended up allowing me to structure it around like we're going to make decisions. Every one of those phases is about making a decision to
Mm.
get through it, and the models really help with that. But yeah, ideally, and then once I realized that, I changed the name. And not to mention there was another slight problem with the name was that there was actually another company that was very named very very similarly that I didn't pick up on when I first built the company, so I had to
Okay.
change it, which
So
is
was
why
it
I'm
good?
resisting naming it.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Well, which is, yeah, because often it seems like a lot of work to have to change the name of a company, right?
It was, yeah, yeah, it
And of
still haunts
course,
me.
and of course, it's still it is a little bit like your child in a way, and you don't want to rename the child, right? Unless you really have
Yeah.
to. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Don't rename your children. Not
Yeah.
advisable.
Right. So, and then at the time that you were doing it, I know you were still, quite data driven. I think you've maybe changed your views on data a little bit since then. But so I might skip that one for now, and then we'll come back to the data piece. One other question I was curious about making sure I ask you, which is, so I know you focus on helping SaaS businesses,
Mm.
even though, I mean, you're essentially a services business yourself, right? But how transferable is your pricing framework, your PACE pricing framework to other industries outside of SaaS?
You know, for a long time, I didn't think it was super transferable, but then I met more and more people and I would have conversations with them and they would, naturally ask, what do you do? And I would say, and they said, it's really interesting, or they would just glaze over and not want to talk about it. But those people that found it interesting would lean in and I would explain. They're like, oh, well, I run this kind of as an accounting firm or whatever it happens to be. And we'd end up having a conversation about value and value exchange and offers, and it all lined up and it worked.
Mhm.
And so that's when I started to realize that it was fully transferable. And then, of course, it dawned on me, of course, it is, because most everything we're doing is based on what, if we're doing B2B, right? People are trying to make progress against something in their business, right? And
Mhm.
so and every other business on the planet that's selling to a business is trying to help them make progress on whatever it is they're trying to make progress on. So if we
Mhm.
can line up around those things, then of course it's going to work. And that's what we do in SaaS, and that's what we do in B2B. services. And at some level, you can do it at B2C. Now, not all the things hold true in B2C, but in B2B, definitely. Like, I have not met a company yet that I haven't been able to have a good conversation about value and how their customers get value and watch a few aha moments show up in the founder's eyes,
Yeah.
which is really fun, because I think maybe even just a function of having thought about it from a product lens for so many years,
Right.
that even in of itself is a bit of a switch for people, as they often think. I
Sure.
was like, well, we just sell this and we charge per hour for it and we do it this way. And I'm like, but what are they really buying? And
Yes.
so we start there.
Gets back to the value proposition.
Mhm.
Okay. So, and then you also, so you emphasize the job customers hire a product to do, right?
Mhm.
Or in this case, we're starting to talk about, it doesn't really matter what the business does. And let's sort
Mhm.
of keep it in the B2B space for now.
Sure.
So, you were just talking about, well, how do you provide value, to your customer or your client? How should founders use the jobs to be done lens? Because I know, again, that, that's kind of the lens you use,
Mhm.
jobs to be done lens, which I believe is more of a SaaS and maybe a manufacturing type term. But when building pricing, product, and positioning, how should founders use the jobs to be done lens?
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing about jobs to be done, and I've had a debate about this with other pricing folks, where they just talk about, well, it's just a problem and you have outcomes, right? This kind of thing. And I'm like, it might be if you distill it down to that. But when you talk about a job to be done, there's inherently semantic difference. It's what is someone actually going to hire something to do? So, for example, I need my grass cut. It is a problem I have. I may not be willing to pay someone to do it. But when when there's enough pressure on me to be like, look, this is just not worth my time to do, or whatever the push might be to actually change it, I will hire someone or something to solve that problem. It might be a robotic mower, it might be the kid down the street, but I'm going to hire for that. So the reason I like jobs to be done, and way I think people can use it, is it inherently has monetization built in. Like, a job is something you're willing to pay to have done,
Yeah.
or you're willing to hire something to have it done. And so,
Yeah.
whereas a problem might just be like, I have a lot of problems I'm not going to spend money to solve. And I think we all do. So I think that's the first lens that I like using. The other one is that it recognizes that there is a trigger moment where someone has to make a decision about going to buy something or hire someone. And we all have this. Like, nobody grows into pain,
Yeah.
right? So, it's a who not how problem perhaps, or, you go hire someone to do something because it's finally just too much for you to deal with. That's that moment that we talk about. If founders can capture truly understanding the motivations behind someone switching from whatever it is they're doing to something else, then we can set up the positioning in such a way that it just catches that, it pulls them in like a tractor beam, if we can use that same language back at them at some level. So to me, that's what it really sets up, that the push and the pull, which is a gentleman named Bob Mesta, who does a lot of jobs to be done research, and this is his sort of his framework is around this.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think they can use it in that way. It's really about understanding a common lens of value of your customer and gets you out of your solution, right? Because we, as founders, we're always thinking about the product itself, and this is the feature it has, and this is the things it does, and all that kind of stuff. But really what you should be thinking about is like, what is our customer actually trying to do in their business, one layer above my solution, and how does my solution help solve that problem or solve portions of that job to be done? And so if you can constantly be above your solution, thinking about it, that's great. I was talking to another gentleman today, another pricing guy, and we were talking about this. And I think he used the version of like butter. I think if you're trying to sell butter, it's like you can talk, well, we need unsalted butter and we need this, we need that. But it's like, well, the real job to be done here is I need to be able to, people want to be able to consume healthy fats, right? Like, that's the job you're trying to solve. And it's like, butter is just one of those solutions. But if you just think about like, oh, I just need unsalted butter, like you're too low in the problem space. And so it's too low in the solution space. You need to stay in that problem space. So I think that's one of the big benefits that founders can use, is just constantly staying in the problem space and then figuring out how you help them make progress on the job to be done over and over and over again. And yeah, I'll stop there. But
so essentially what that jobs to be done perspective is it's if you do the jobs to be done, you will solve the problem. So it's kind of the same. It's the other side of the same coin. So, but most of us are looking at it like, what is the problem we need solved? And then when you flip it around, it's like, okay, so what are the jobs we need to do to solve the problem? right? Is that essentially what
Yeah,
it
it's
is?
sort of. It's like it's almost what is the customer's what are they trying to do? What's the job they're trying to get done?
Yes.
And then it's like so it's less about the problem that we're trying to solve and more about because we can never really fully do the job for them. This is the thing that
Mm-hmm.
I try and drive into founders' brains sometimes. It's like, we'll increase your revenue by 80%. I'm like, no, you will not. You single-handedly will not do that. Your product may help with that, help make progress against making more revenue in their business. But you
Yeah.
probably, unlikely can you claim that you are the generator of that. Might be some products that can do that, but very rare. So I find
Mm.
that is the real rub is like figuring out what the customer is trying to make progress on and then just figuring out how you can ease that transition, make that faster, make it easier for them, all of those things in B2B. Because look, in B, what are the things we can move? Time and money. That's it. And that's two sides of the same coin in a lot of cases, right? I can save you time, which saves you money, or I can make you money, which, manufactures time. Like there's all these two things. That's all we can really affect. But you can't
Yeah.
go to market with my value prop is save you time. So many
Yeah.
companies do, but it's probably not the best value proposition, right?
Right. Yeah.
There's something else they're trying to achieve. The outcome might be more time, but there's something else they're trying to achieve along the way that
Mm.
will result in that outcome. So you can't, anyway, there's a lot here, but
Sure.
ultimately that's sort of when I think of jobs to be done is this idea of progress. People are trying to make progress in their life. And then
Yes.
where do we
Yeah.
fit in on that? And I'll just add this one thing. The beautiful thing about it is that you can solve a big portion of a job to be done for someone.
Mm-hmm.
And two ways to expand on that afterwards is like looking at all the areas of that job to be done. Can we participate in all of the areas of the job to be done? And if
Mm-hmm.
you can, that's great. What's the next job to be done after they're done with this one?
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a natural progression now about how you start expanding your own service line.
Mm-hmm. So, and as you're thinking about this, I've been doing a lot of reading again recently about sort of the sort of theory of constraints, or which is so again, you're talking about making progress, right? So every leadership team, and again, just keeping it in that sort of B2B environment is trying to make progress. And typically, to make progress, it's often about what are the obstacles or the constraints that we need to remove, knowing that if we do that, we will make progress, right? So
Mhm.
does that ever come in? I mean, is that
Yeah.
part of how you think about it?
Yeah, 100%. Sorry. Yeah, that's exactly correct. So it's like, where is the friction in what they're doing today to actually get there, right? Which is the obstacle. So
Sure.
identifying the friction, there's a lot of what we call emotional jobs and social jobs that go along with jobs to be done. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
what's the deep anxiety? What's actually feeding some of this stuff and how can we help resolve those?
Yeah.
But yeah, the friction points are probably the biggest. Like what's clumsy, what's not working, what's preventing you from actually making progress. That's
Mm-hmm.
the underlying functional job to be done. Like we can get really deep, really granular with these jobs to be done, as well as
Yeah.
high level. But yeah, you get into those sort of what are the friction points, and that's what you're trying to solve. So that's the constraint for sure. Is that there's a reason we're not all flying around in flying cars, right? Because there's
Yeah.
a lot of constraints.
Yeah, much to my dismay, I've been dreaming about a flying car for forever, so I'm hoping it's going to happen soon.
Yeah.
So Bill, I want to circle back to I know you've also been on this journey as many people have of I guess I don't know how long ago it was where you were data driven, right?
Mhm.
I've sensed that more recently you've got a different way of thinking about
Mhm.
um, data than you used to. What is that?
Yeah,
What
I
has that
mean,
changed?
data is incredibly powerful. It can tell you exactly what you want to know, no matter what it is that you want to know. And you can torture data probably pretty much into telling you whatever you want it to tell you. But data is just one piece. What I've realized is data, I always say like price with confidence. And what gives you confidence is data. And I've
Mm-hmm.
realized it's not actually what gives you confidence. It can help. It can certainly, make the case for more confidence. But confidence usually comes from belief, and the belief sometimes has to be backed up by doing. And so for me, what I've realized is that the data gets us so far. But if
Mm-hmm.
you don't have the belief in what you're actually doing, that you think this is going to work, or the team doesn't believe it, it's never going to get off the ground. And
Mm.
so I've seen incredibly great pricing models be designed by me, by other people that never get off the ground because the team just is not there yet in the commitment or the that this is actually going to work. So there's something else at play here, right? There's
Mm.
some anxieties that are play that you show them all the data in the world. It's like, look, you'll get a 20% lift. You'll do this. This is what people are going to be happy. They're going to do this. And they just don't believe it. And
Mm.
so what I've realized is that everybody needs to get on the same page. We all need to have some level of belief in the system. And which is, again, why I use jobs to be done, because it's a unifier. We can all think about it the exact same way. Every department can think about the job to be done the exact same way. It's a common lens of value. And if each group doesn't believe, then it's probably not going to get off the ground. So how do you get them to believe? And so it's really about repetition, having conversations with either customers or like there's layers of validation, I call it. And so it's the first layer is like, do we kind of feel like it's going to work? And so it's not necessarily belief, but like, could this work? And it's like, yes. The next layer of belief is like, cool, let's go test it with some real customers, existing customers. Let's go talk to them about it, share with them what we're doing, and see what they would pick. Almost what I call a purchase simulation. We actually take them through a situation where they have to rebuy the software, fictitiously, but like we take them through that process. And the feedback from those feedback loops on these small experiments, that's really what builds the belief, right? So the data is important, and I used to obsess about being incredibly precise about it all. And the most important thing is I would rather be directionally accurate than super precise. And being directionally accurate is about getting enough information, enough data to make quality decisions. And once we believe that we can make the quality decisions, and then we can validate that we've made quality decisions with dipping our toe in the water, so to speak.
By taking action. Yeah.
By taking action. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's it. And that's an iterative process. So belief is built, not bestowed, like it's not like, here's your new pricing model, please believe. It's like, we build this through iterative work. So I don't know if that was a reasonable explanation, but that's kind of how I feel about it these days, is about belief more so than data.
No, I really like that. And I think it's going to become truer and truer, here in the next year. I'm trying to avoid using a 2-letter word for now, but we'll probably get there in the next few minutes. So the other thing that I've heard you talk about is the fact that, so even though, leaders are coming to you to solve what they think is a pricing problem, I've heard you talk about the fact that pricing, product, and positioning, which seem like very different things. I've heard you say that those three things cannot be separated. How do you explain that?
Well, I used to say pricing is product and product is pricing, right? Because whatever you are creating, you have to build out and offer to people. So it's got to do what they want, and your pricing sort of reflects that. And it never really quite jived for me 100%. Like it was good, but it wasn't. But I realized what I'm saying here is positioning. So positioning, pricing, and product, they can't be separated, because however you position the product, so say you start off with positioning, however you decide to position in the market is going to dictate kind of what you build and how you solve the problem, and probably also how you price it. Like those things are going to get connected. If you start off with pricing, then it's certainly going to impact what you build, because, if you decide to be the budget, best bang for your buck kind of solution, you're probably going to build something that's a little tighter, a little, I don't know, like you're going to try and come at it a different way. And you're certainly going to position it a different way, right?
Yeah.
In
for
market.
higher volume, for example.
Yeah. And the same thing with the product, right? Like if you're building these features, then you have to be considering pricing and you have to be considering positioning. Otherwise, how are you deciding to build it? And how are you deciding how to build it? And so for me, all those things are connected in a way that, to me, I guess seems obvious now. Like if you think about like a CRO's job in some way, like they kind of sit between the sales, marketing, and product organizations, and making sure there's a holistic kind of revenue engine happening. That's the same kind of thing. It's really the connective tissue between those things. And so when I get brought in to solve a pricing problem, it often ends up impacting product. Like, so there's something that's going to change in the product to get us to where we need to be from value capture perspective. It could be a big overhaul or it could be minor. And certainly the way it's positioned will change, because my guess is that after doing the jobs to be done research, we're really going to truly, have a better understanding of the value proposition, and it may change the way we point ourselves in market. And so it's surprising sometimes that when I have my first initial conversations with people, they're like, yeah, we're just worried we're not charging enough, or we're not, we're charging too little, or maybe we're overcharging. Like it's all about the dollar signs. And I often tell them, I said, it's far less important about how much you charge than it is about how you charge. And that's where pricing and product and positioning sort of all live, is like in the how you charge.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting listening to you. I mean, you're one of those people who, you can actually, I can see how you're thinking and how you think and how you solve problems. And I guess one of the ways I'm thinking about it is the word that comes up is workflows, which again is one of those words I think is going to take on an entirely different meaning. And now that we've been talking for probably more than half an hour, I'm finally going to get to the 2-letter word, which I think this might be a record for podcasts in the last 6 to 12 months. But anyway, um, so you embraced AI early in your own workflows. How do you think AI will change how SaaS companies design products, pricing, and operations?
That's a big one. Yes, this is so whatever we say here is going to change completely in the next 30 minutes. So that's just how that's going to go.
We'll timestamp it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The way that I would say the biggest thing that I'm seeing that's changing is that there's, in the SaaS bubble I live in, there's a bit of an obsession around outcome driven pricing now. And for those of us who have been in pricing for a long time, this has been the thing we've been always after. We just haven't had a good way of doing it. And so that is that you want to price your offering and charge for the thing that is as close to value as you can get, right? As close to the outcome that someone's really, truly getting from your product. You want to charge for that item because that's where the value really lives. But what we've defaulted to for a long time is charging per seat and stuff, right? Which is really charging for access. Like we're charging at the door. We're charging for admission. You can come in. Well, is it a good party? You'll have to find out. It's like you get in and there's 5 people there all standing around, right? So it's, you're charging for access. So that's often not where the value is. So there's that continuum of like charging for access to charging for outcomes. And the closer we can get to outcomes, the better. And what AI has allowed us to do is really actually start to give people the outcomes they're after, because the AI can, in a lot of cases, is doing the work to actually get to the outcome. Because for a long time, like I mentioned, it's like you can't really claim that your product delivers 80% revenue increase if there's like a whole department of people having to use it to actually get there.
Yeah.
But with AI, sometimes it can actually deliver you the outcome on its own or with very little human intervention. So the poster child for all this these days is support ticket software. Right.
Yeah.
So come in, I'm on the website, I've got a problem. The robot takes over the chat. Did this solve your problem? Yes or no? Yes. Cool. You pay Intercom or whatever company 99 cents for the resolution. And I would rather pay 99 cents per resolution than to have a bunch of people on staff answering questions and maybe not having the same success rate.
Sure.
And so that's true sort of outcome. So I think AI is really having a big impact on that. But the thing is that there's not, outcomes are still elusive. They're still really elusive.
It's still a moving target. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's hard to capture those and hard to claim them. Like even I've heard stories even in the support ticket side, like people arguing over, well, did you really solve the problem? Like, are you actually responsible for it? Or was someone else's intervention? And that's where it gets tricky. So with AI, so I think that's one thing. So in traditional SaaS, as people pivot towards adding more and more AI into their products, we're going to be able to get closer and closer to value-based pricing. The other thing that's happening at the same time is, for the first time in a very long time, is that the more people that use your product and take advantage of these tools, the more it costs you. And that as a SaaS company, which is kind of, almost against the model, right? Because the model is just based on economies of scale. Build it once, sell it to everybody, and you have like an AWS compute bill. Now it's like you have inference cost every time someone's asking a question of your AI and doing things, and it's costing you real money. So there's that side of it. So there's a big shift now in terms of like, how do we handle the cost model? And so that's a big shift for people. And I often like to think it's like, okay, well, now you finally have to run, like you're now having to finally run what a lot of businesses, especially in B2B businesses, have had to deal with for a long time. It's like actual cost of delivery, which they have been, rightly enjoying for many, many years, in terms of, which is why it's so attractive, 85% margins and all that. So that's another big shift. It's figuring out cost models and how those are going to impact your bottom line. And then I would say the other one is software that's showing up that is AI first. They have the advantage of not having lived through SaaS necessarily. And now they're thinking more in terms of roles and responsibilities inside an organization, as opposed to a tool that someone else uses. They're thinking about, how can I actually accomplish this process almost end to end? And so it's really about employee replacement. I'll say that. I mean, nobody wants to say it, but that's kind of what it is, or role replacement or function replacement. And so you hear these things all the time about, I built a N8N automation with like 50 outbound sales reps and I've automated my entire sales. I'm like, well, first of all, it's link bait, but you really haven't. But there are genuine, really good companies out there solving really, really hard problems that look an awful lot like a replacement for a bum in a seat.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. And I think that's really where it's going. So now that's starting to get priced against, well, what would it cost you to do that normally? Right.
Correct.
And so,
but I think that's the hard part though, right? Is like as you were saying, it's like there's this massive shift that has to occur. And again, it has to start at the leadership within every single organization that has to go through this shift. And if I think about it for example, through the HubSpot ecosystem, which actually, as a side note, so their customer agent, which is essentially what you were talking about, their customer service agent is probably is the agent that's getting the most traction within the HubSpot product. But they are going to struggle with the same pricing model that you were just alluding to. But then you also have a very decentralized partner ecosystem with over 7,000 global partners that are all trying to sell the product, in addition to the 1,200 plus reps at HubSpot. So that the change management component of that is massive. And if the message doesn't get out to the customer correctly, then that's not going to be a good experience, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Especially with something so new, right? Where,
Right.
a lot of people are still kind of have a lot of anxiety around AI.
Yeah. And then the other thing you were talking about, which I've been calling for the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, results as a service, which replaces SaaS. So instead of having software as a service, the entire SaaS industry has been thinking, well, how do we get to results as a service? And even if we know that that's the destination, again, how do you shift from what you have today to that? In most cases, in very complex ecosystems with partners and what have you. So that definitely an interesting challenge. But what I like most about where you're going with this is it circles back and really reaffirms your commitment to the jobs to be done model, because we're thinking about this a lot, from a services perspective, where our clients are paying us to guide them through, like, how are their processes going to change? How does that impact their sort of data architecture, and therefore how does that impact their technology architecture to drive their business outcomes? And if we now start using, you talked about the N8N example, if we're now building an agentic workforce to work alongside our marketing team, sales team, service team, etc. Again, it all comes down to jobs to be done, and
Even more so, yeah.
So if for the jobs to be done, which of those jobs need to be done by humans and which of those jobs can and will be done by agents or assistants? Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, and then there's I think the biggest, to that end, it's like, which ones should be done by agents, which ones should be done by humans, and which ones should be, how do we build like the cyborg, the augmented human that, a lot of the work is being done by the agent, but you're still there in an oversight capacity or somehow involved, that human in the loop they talk about, right? So
Yep.
to me, I think that one of the biggest moats, if we talk about SaaS, and we've talked about cost already, but in SaaS, it's like in almost any business, really, it's like delivery cost as low as possible, customer acquisition costs as low as possible. Those are defensible moats, right? Because if I can acquire them at twice or half the cost you can acquire them for, I'm going to beat you every time. And if I can deliver it at half the cost you can deliver it, I'm going to beat you every time, right? So I have more oxygen in my business to invest in those things, and therefore I can just, try and gorilla you. But in the age of AI, I think there's another moat, which is trust. And I think that's the thing that gets missed a lot, because you have every opportunity someone interacts with that AI or that thing that you built, the agent, whatever it happens to be, it's only as good as the output, and you're only as good as your last output at some level. Like we might have some tolerance for a few mess ups, but if it starts continually messing up or we don't trust the results, we're just going to just not trust it at all. And that's really hard to win back. Yeah. And so we need to figure out a way inside these new products to build trust. And that's often human in the loop or other things. Because eventually I'm going to be okay with, like I did this in my own workflows. I had built an automation that helped me distill down my thoughts from a pricing strategy review call into a deck that I could send a customer. And I used to take 2 hours to do this myself, and I would still mess around with AI trying to help me get the right wording and all that kind of stuff. But I finally built the mother of all prompts to solve this problem. And now, at 2 minutes after those calls are over, I have a presentation sitting in Slack and my inbox waiting to be updated. And I look at it and I read it, and I really pained over it for the first 5 or 6, but eventually I just said, like, I know it's going to be good. I know it's going to be good. So I still check it. I still review and make sure there's no, it's captured what I was actually talking about.
Yeah,
but
you're still in the loop.
I trust it more and more, right?
Yeah,
so, but I trust it to the point where I don't want to change the model that runs it.
Sure.
Because I've built the trust already, and I don't want to change, if Sonnet 3.7 goes away,
yes,
I'm going to have to go to Opus 4.5, and then I have to test it all over again.
Sure. Yeah, and that, of course, happens pretty frequently. I really would. I mean, so you as you were sort of talking there, you were alluding to the fact that a lot of us are in competition with others. right? Which, one of the things that you and I also know that is the ideal is not to be in competition, but figure out how to be in a space, which brings me back to your third P of positioning, right? So if you get your positioning right, then you don't necessarily have any competition.
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
So
I
yeah. So how do you? I mean, how often does it happen when you're advising a client where you go, oh my gosh, this one is exciting because their positioning is so solid that if we can get the pricing right to fit the product and the positioning, they're going to be off to the races because they don't really have any competition. They're in a blue ocean.
Yeah, often it's the other way. Is that you can sort of
Yes.
see that there's, especially after doing like the customer research, you can also see that there's a different positioning that you could take that will allow you to sail down a very short river into a blue ocean and
Mm,
outside of the Red Sea that you're in. And
mm,
that's more often what I see. But yeah, it's the same side of the coin, or different side of the same coin. Yeah, it's shocking how much the positioning can impact your entire thought process around the business you're building. I first got introduced to positioning. I know that sounds silly, but the first time I got introduced to positioning was through April Dunford's work. And because for me, positioning for a long time was just messaging and marketing, right? That's how I looked at it.
yeah.
But it's really not. It's right. It's kind of like, what do you believe and how do you echo that back to the market? And then basically say to them, if you believe that too, then you should work with us, right? It's almost like
Mm,
the Pied Piper approach. It's like,
yep. Yep.
look, and oftentimes you need to almost create an enemy at some level. It's like, look, this is fine. This has worked for years, but this is the problem we see, and so we think about it this way. And if you
Mhm.
can communicate that, and you find other people that are already thinking that way, then of course they're going to want to work with you. And I think she gave this example. I think she was selling databases. I think back in the day, I want to say early '90s, late '80s,
Mhm.
and they switched to data warehouse from database because they were just constantly being compared against something that they
Mm,
weren't. And then they just repositioned as a data warehouse. And here's the benefits of a data warehouse. It was the same product underneath essentially, but it was
yeah.
repositioned at a market where people were, disenchanted with databases and wanted something different, and they could deliver on that. And so they positioned towards that, and everything changed for them.
Yeah. Yeah. She's
So
got a
that's what I
very
mean by that.
yes. No, I really like her. In fact, I was just wondering if I still had her book here behind me, but
Yeah,
I have it
obviously
somewhere.
awesome. Yeah,
Yeah. Yes.
obviously awesome. Great book.
Okay. So, Bill, unfortunately, we're gonna have to wrap
All
up
good.
here. So, I have one last question. This has been super fun. Thank you so much for joining me. If a founder listening today has not reviewed pricing recently, what is the one action they can take this week that will create real movement and confidence?
That's a great question. If it's been a long time since they've looked at pricing, I would suggest that they get whoever needs to be involved, and I would suggest it's pretty much your executive team, or at least in a room, and start talking about the fact that it hasn't changed and what it should be. I think that's the closest thing you can get, short of being really, really bold and just saying, if you haven't changed your prices in a while, like over a year, just you probably should go raise them by 10 or 15% because you're already losing money compared to last year. Your customers want you to win. They want you to have good pricing. I don't condone just raising prices for the sake of it, but if it's been a long time since you raised them, then you're definitely not feeding yourself enough oxygen to continue that race against your competition. Sort of my take on it. But yeah,
Yeah.
that would be the biggest thing is start talking about it, and figuring out what your customers are struggling with in terms of positioning and product and pricing, and just see if it matches. I know that's probably a big ask, but
Well, yeah, but because I think, for anyone listening, um, and if I think about when the times that I've gone through this same process with our team, you're already thinking about the answer to the next question, which is how do we communicate that to our customers, right?
hmm hmm
And which is often where it's like, oh my gosh, we have to now tell everybody that there's going to be a you know 20% price increase or whatever. Okay, so then maybe to sort of part A to that question is, so let's just assume that they're taking your advice. They've got the leadership team in a room. What should the founder or the leader not do in that room to make sure that they get the best outcome from that discussion?
yeah, I would say a lot of decisions are driven by fear, and I would say to try as best as they can to stow our customers are all going to quit, our customers are all going to leave, they're going to churn, that kind of mentality out of it, and just really truly talk about how you deliver value and how you're capturing it, and
Mhm.
just exploring whether that makes sense. And if you feel like there's a place for change. Often change, like people misunderstand sometimes that changing your pricing doesn't necessarily mean changing the actual price. It could be changing the structure slightly. It could be changing limits and, across plans. There's lots of different ways that you can affect price changes that aren't actually changing the pricing, the dollar sign itself.
Right.
So that's kind of what I would say is what they don't do is limit any of the creative ideas that are going to come out of their team's mouths. Everybody's going to have an opinion on this, and they're all going to have their own internal motivations for what it should be. Right? Sales is going to see, don't raise the price. It's hard enough to sell as it is. Marketing is going to be like, well, we just finished doing all the, new messaging. Do I have to do this over again? CS is going to be like, oh, I have to tell all the customers they're going to get mad. Right? Yeah. Product's like, oh, we just made a bunch of changes. Is this going to make more changes? Like everybody has their own lens of their internal anxieties, and also they have their own lens about how customers get value. So our only choice as a leader is to try and circle those people in alignment around what are the progress we're trying to make for our customer, and to get them to push down, or at least for now, the anxieties around those things. I often start, the very first thing I do is a hopes and fears exercise. That's how I clear the room. Right. And I learned this from a really good friend, Joel Smith, and he runs this great thing in all of our sessions, hopes and fears. Like, what do you hope to get out of put yourself in a time machine. It's a year from now. We did all the price work. What happened? What do you hope to get out of this? Right. And then on the other side of it, it's like, well, put yourself in a time machine. You go ahead of you. It went terrible. What happened? What are all the fears? What are you scared of? And we just get it all on the table, and we all have a conversation about it, and it clears the air. It gets everybody sort of aligned. Yeah. So going back on that, I would say I would start there. Hopes and fears.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Yeah. Bill, thanks again so much for joining me today. I know we could have gone in many different directions, and we would have learned a lot, but I look forward to the next conversation. So thanks again.
Yeah, me too. This was great. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay.